There's a version of this that probably sounds a little familiar. Someone in your family needs money. Maybe it's a parent who's behind on a bill, or a sibling who just lost their job. Or it's a family member who keeps finding themselves in a crisis. And this somehow always lands in your lap. And then you help because that's what you do. Because you're the one who has it together. Because saying no feels like abandoning someone who is genuinely struggling. And because somewhere along the way, maybe a long time ago, you became the person in this family that people turn to when things go wrong. And here's what nobody tells you about that role. It comes with a cost that runs far deeper than the money itself. Being the financially responsible one in your family is often presented as a good thing. And in some ways, it is. But there's a side of it that almost nobody talks about. A specific grinding financial and psychological cost that accumulates quietly over years, that rarely gets named clearly, and that can significantly undermine the financial future of the very person who is trying to hold everything together. You're so focused on keeping everyone else afloat that you never quite notice how far your own finances have drifted. Here's the mechanism that most people in this position have never had named for them. What you're experiencing has a term in psychology. It's called the identified caretaker role. When one person in a family system consistently steps up to manage crises, stabilize financial emergencies, and smooth over the consequences of other people's poor decisions, the family system, unconsciously, not maliciously, begins to rely on that person structurally. The crises don't reduce over time. In some family systems, they actually increase because the safety net exists. Your reliability has, over time, taught the people around you that someone will catch them when they fall. That's not a criticism of them. It's just how family systems work. And once you're in that role, getting out of it feels like betrayal rather than self-preservation. And this is important. The role isn't assigned to you because your family is careless or selfish, though it might feel that way sometimes. It's assigned to you because you demonstrated, at some point, that you could handle it. You showed competence. You showed stability. You showed up. And the system adjusted around you. The problem isn't that anyone chose to take advantage of you. The problem is that the system found its equilibrium around your reliability, and now that equilibrium depends on you continuing to play your part. Now here's the part that's really worth sitting with. The financial cost of being the family caretaker isn't just what you give, it's what you don't build. Every dollar that goes to a family emergency is a dollar that isn't compounding in an investment account. Every financial decision you make to accommodate someone else's instability, staying in a lower-paying job because you can't afford the risk of a transition, not moving cities for an opportunity because someone needs you nearby, not increasing your savings rate because there's always something coming. Those decisions have a compounding cost that never shows up in any calculation. You see the money you give. You don't see the money you didn't grow. Think about that for a second. The visible cost is the check you wrote, the Venmo you sent, the bill you covered. The invisible cost is the retirement contributions you didn't make, the investment account that stayed flat, the financial window that stayed closed while the immediate fire got put out. Over 10 or 15 years, the invisible cost is almost always larger than the visible one. There's also a psychological cost that's equally significant and even less visible. People in caretaker roles often develop what researchers call a compressed financial identity, meaning their own financial goals, plans, and ambitions get chronically deprioritized in favor of the immediate needs of others. You stop thinking seriously about your own retirement because you're focused on whether your parent can pay their rent this month. You delay your own financial planning conversations because something always comes up. And slowly, quietly, your financial future becomes the thing you'll deal with when things settle down. Except in these family systems, things almost never settle down. What conventional financial advice gets completely wrong here is that it treats this as a budgeting problem. The standard response is to set limits, establish boundaries, communicate clearly about what you can and can't do. And all of that is technically correct. But it misses the emotional architecture that makes those limits nearly impossible to maintain. Because the reason you keep saying yes isn't a failure of communication. It's a deeply embedded psychological pattern, a combination of obligation, guilt, identity, and fear that has been built over decades. You're not bad at boundaries. You're responding to a system that has been specifically calibrated to make saying no feel like causing harm. The guilt you feel when you consider saying no isn't a reliable moral signal. It's a conditioned response. It was trained into you by years of being the person who says yes, and by the family system that learned to expect that answer. That distinction matters, because if you treat the guilt as moral truth, you'll keep deferring to it forever. If you understand it as a learned response, you can start to examine it. There's a concept called parentification. When a child takes on adult responsibilities in a family system, often including financial ones, that frequently underlies the adult caretaker role. If you were the kid who figured things out early, who was praised for being mature and responsible, who was turned to for practical help even as a teenager, then the role you're playing as an adult is likely an extension of a role you were placed in before you had any real choice about it. You didn't become the responsible one through a conscious decision. You were shaped into it. And the expectations that come with that role are things you absorbed so long ago that they feel like your own values rather than external impositions. Now, I want to be careful here. Some of what makes the caretaker role feel impossible to step back from is genuine love and genuine obligation. Supporting an aging parent who genuinely cannot support themselves, helping a sibling through a real crisis. These aren't irrational. Family is real. Obligation is real. And I'm not suggesting you should become someone who turns away from people they love. What I am saying is that there's a difference between chosen, conscious, sustainable support and chronic, obligatory, self-depleting rescue. And most people in this position have never had the space to clearly see which one they're actually doing. Here's the reframe I want to offer. Your financial security is not a selfish goal. It is actually the most useful thing you can build for everyone in your family system over the long term. A financially secure version of you, one who has savings, has retirement funding, has a financial foundation that isn't constantly being eroded, is far more capable of real support over decades than a financially depleted version of you who has given everything away in a series of short-term rescues. The airplane oxygen mask analogy is overused, but it's true. You cannot help anyone from a position of financial collapse, and that's where chronic structural family caretaking leads, if it isn't examined. So, what does examining it actually look like? The first thing, and this requires real honesty, is separating the genuinely necessary from the genuinely optional. Not all family financial support is the same. Supporting an elderly parent who has no resources is a different situation than repeatedly bailing out an adult sibling who makes consistently poor decisions and faces no real consequences because you remove them. Both can feel equally urgent in the moment. They are not equally necessary. Getting honest about which category each situation falls into is not cruel. It's the precondition for actually making sustainable decisions. The second is understanding that money given without consequence often removes the learning that would otherwise happen. This is what psychologists call enabling, not in a blaming sense, but in a purely mechanical one. When the consequences of financial decisions are consistently absorbed by someone else, the incentive to change those decisions disappears. You're not helping someone build a better financial life when you remove every consequence of the current one. In some cases, not all, but some, stepping back creates the conditions for real change in a way that continuing to rescue never does. The third is building what I'd call a protected financial category. Before you allocate any money toward family support, you fund your own retirement contribution. You pay your own emergency fund. You cover your own needs. This isn't selfishness, it's structural. Because if you don't protect those categories explicitly, They will be the first things that get raided when the next family emergency arrives, and there will always be a next one. This last piece is the hardest to implement because it requires not just a financial decision, but an identity shift. If your sense of yourself, who you are in your family, what you're valued for, what makes you feel like a good person, is tied up in being the one who helps, then protecting your own financial future will feel like a violation of that identity. It will feel selfish even when it isn't. It will generate guilt even when the guilt isn't warranted. And that guilt is not a signal that you're doing something wrong. It's a signal that you're changing a role you've played for a very long time. Here's what I want you to remember when that guilt shows up. The most sustainable version of care is care that doesn't hollow you out. Every caretaker who burns out financially or emotionally eventually has nothing left to give. The choice isn't between helping your family and not helping your family. It's between helping them in a way that lasts and helping them in a way that ends. You are allowed to build your own financial future. You are allowed to have retirement savings and an emergency fund and financial goals that are entirely your own. You are allowed to help your family from a position of genuine stability rather than a position of perpetual sacrifice. Those things are not in conflict with being a loving, caring person in your family. They're the precondition for being one sustainably. The trap of being the responsible one isn't that you care too much. It's that the role was built around you in a way that made caring for yourself feel like not caring enough. That's the thing worth seeing clearly. Because once you see it clearly, you can make different choices. Not because you care less about your family, but because you finally started counting yourself as someone worth caring about too. If this named something you've been carrying, subscribe. Every week, we dig into the financial patterns and psychological dynamics that shape money decisions in ways most people never talk about. And drop a comment. Are you the responsible one in your family? I'd genuinely like to hear what that's looked like for you.